My name is Amy Roberts and I'm the project manager at Comics Youth. We're a youth organisation led by and for young people, and we support marginalised and disadvantaged young people throughout the Liverpool city region via a range of creative avenues and workshops such as zine-making, comic book creation, blogging and poetry jams. We're a creative hub for the young marginalised communities of the city, and our goal is to ensure that every one of our young people feels supported, inspired, valued and heard, while also using our online channels and real-life hub as safe spaces where they can be themselves, free of any threat or discrimination. We have a lot of young transgender and non-binary members here at Comics Youth, and when the story broke of the potential for our government to be scrapping plans for gender recognition laws to be reformed, it left a very noticeable and negative impact. In the weeks that followed, and the subsequent discussion and debates that sprawled from it on social media and in the news, many of our trans and non-binary young people struggled with their mental well-being. We were overwhelmed with safeguarding. Some of these young people were openly suicidal. Others we were simply concerned about due to their blatant withdrawal. The proposal that there will potentially be no reform to the GRA is damaging and dispiriting to these young people, but it also plays a huge hand in another issue that is just as toxic and troubling. There are obviously concerns as to how trans and non-binary young people can safely and happily have autonomy over their identity, as well as how they can truly live as themselves unchallenged when the freedom to self-identify continues to be so inaccessible to them. But on another level, the government refusing to make changes to gender recognition laws that would make self-identification easier, simpler and cheaper for trans people sends an aggressive message to transgender young people that they do not matter, they are not valued, and that they are not important enough to be given the basic right to exist. Our transgender young people were frightened and saddened by the prospect that the GRA might not be reformed, but they were also crushed by what this news represented to them. Another in a long line of microaggressions that suggest that transgender identity is not valid enough to be respected or acknowledged, and that transgender identity is not valid enough to be made into a straightforward, autonomous act of transition. From speaking with our young people at that time and since, it's clear that this news made them feel hopeless at a time when hope is already in short supply. It's also evident that they're exhausted by having to continually have the same conversation time and time again about their right to exist and still not be heard by the end of those conversations. When we reached out to our transgender young people regarding these issues to see if they had anything they wanted to contribute to the conversation, we were saddened but not surprised to find that many of them didn't have much to say. And it isn't that they have nothing to say on the matter, but quite the opposite. They're currently overwhelmed by the conversation and the implications of it, and they are tired of having to continually talk about it in an attempt to convince others that they deserve basic human rights on an accessible and achievable level. Currently, our transgender young people are worn out by this fight. They're worn out by having to prove themselves and their worth, and they're worn down by a culture that says that young adults don't know their own minds, and that they certainly shouldn't have the power or authority to state their identity and to live their identity without challenge. All they have ever asked for is the opportunity to live freely as themselves and with dignity. And all that they're currently hearing in response to this is high-profile people like J.K. Rowling asserting that granting such opportunities to young people is dangerous and a major threat to society. They repeatedly hear their identity as a punchline to jokes in mainstream media, and they hear some of the most powerful people in the country suggest that they could make the lives of young transgender people better and easier, but that they just don't want to. And understandably, they're exhausted by all of it. This is about more than simply reforming the Gender Recognition Act. This is about acknowledging that the process of self-identification is such a simple and natural one that it deserves to be something that is easy for anyone to access. It's about making the statement that transgender people are not dangerous or a threat, that transgender identity is not a phase, and that transgender identity and transgender youth are valid and valued in our society. While it's obviously more critical than ever that we continue to platform and to elevate transgender voices in the conversation about transgender rights, it's also time that cisgender allies with the power and the privilege to incite change step up and say more and do more to support a community who are really feeling the brunt of being repeatedly ignored, attacked, devalued, and degraded. Simply put, and this is no exaggeration at all, protecting the rights of transgender people is genuinely a matter of life and death. We know this at Comics Youth. We see this. We are painfully privy to how high the stakes are in all of this. Supporting transgender rights will save countless lives, and particularly those of vulnerable young people. So please, fight for transgender youth. Listen to them. And please use your power and your influence to stand up for them and to save them.